I'm not Kenny Schuman, I'm Scott Wilson. I guess Kenny's vacationing somewhere. I guess start out with a roll call.
Okay, Ms. Quetch?
Here. I'm sorry.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Weaver?
Here.
Mr. Pennington? Mr. Sproles?
Here.
Mr. Wilson?
Here.
And Mr. Schuman is absent.
All right, thank you. First order of business is approval of the minutes from our March 28th, 2022 meeting. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at these and if you have any items that need to be changed or addressed. All right, have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, I guess there's no discussion, so we do a roll call for that or just?
We can.
All right, go ahead.
All right.
The roll call.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Sproles?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye. All right, great, thank you. Move on to public comments. I don't believe anyone signed up for public comment, so you'll have an opportunity to speak as we go through each item as well, if you need to. So we'll move on to preliminary subdivision plat review. First one up is 968 Main Street. A sidewalk waiver for 968 Main Street, tax map ID 104C1-1-27. And you want
I'll give a little
to
staff
tell us a
report.
little bit about that?
Sure. Lyanna Rice. So Richard and Darlene Hagee are the owners and the applicants, and they're requesting the subdivision. As part of it, they're also requesting a sidewalk waiver. So staff has made the suggestion that you do two motions because the sidewalk waiver is actually something that's decided by town council, and the subdivision, preliminary subdivision, is decided by the planning commission. So as you all probably know, this property, there's a bank and then there's two other buildings. And honestly, the applicants are really just looking to be able to, sell the bank, separate the property. It's fully developed. There's not a whole lot going on here. There's not a proposed development. There's no proposed new construction. The primary goal is really the division and purchase. They have indicated that there's not a visual difference in parking or access between each of the properties. We look at section 4.5, which is the consideration by the Planning Commission for subdivisions, and we see that staff has put together this review of the items, but there is nothing new that's being developed. So basically, I put throughout none proposed, already built, so that you could see it. So the only item in question here is the applicants are requesting a waiver from the requirements of 6.7 by the town council. And so today your role is to recommend approval or denial of that waiver. Town council will meet on May 5th, 2022 to make a determination. So my recommendation is that if you do want to approve the preliminary plat, that you do so with the conditions from the town council so that the applicants don't have to funnel back and come to you a second time. If you did recommend approval of the waiver and town council chose to not, and denies that sidewalk waiver, at that point, the applicants would have to come back to you. So, you could see that our town engineer, Tyler Vinsel, provided an analysis with his attached memo. And just reading into the record, what he basically said is the project site is located on a 5-lane section of West Main that carries an annual average daily traffic of 21,000 cars each direction. Sidewalk connections cannot be made on either side of the proposed subdivision. In fact, the nearest existing sidewalk location is approximately 0.4 miles to the east. So in his opinion, a larger scope project involving engineering analysis and design to study the overall impact, location and safety of the sidewalks, and crossing locations for this area is preferred in lieu of creating sections of disconnected sidewalks. And I'll just pull it up here on Google Maps so you can kind of see the area that we're talking about. So we're right here, if sidewalks were to be proposed, basically right where they would go, we've got all of these poles directly in the way. And then Tyler's also other concern about sidewalks was actually just the steep grade that exists between here and the road. So it would be almost impossible without a full project on this street to just enact sidewalks, because you wouldn't be able to actually come along this way and ultimately connect to a sidewalk through here. So again, we're, supportive of sidewalks as staff, but we do think that in this situation, it would make sense if it's a bigger overall project. So with that,
Have a question
Yeah.
as to, are there applicable easements for utility and setbacks along the property?
there are setbacks along the property, but for example, if let's just say this was a larger project, more likely than not, we'd have to,
Yeah,
look
we're gonna
at-
be relocating some poles and things of this
Relocating them.
nature.
Yeah.
But as far as any easements situate along Lee Highway,
Yeah, and I did
along the
not
front.
look up any easements for utilities. In most situations, in most subdivisions, we have a 10-foot easement, that's applied along the front, so.
any of you all know whenever the plat was recorded or done, if there were easements?
There are no easements on that property, but the community college owns a 30-foot swath beside the building between me and the building to the east.
If you all wanna come up and state your name for the record and your address and, present or answer questions.
You want us to present?
If you would like to, you can, tell us a little bit about it.
I'll do it, and I'll structure it a way that kind of gives you guys an out.
Thank you.
Because it's going to be
I'm a
lengthy.
troublemaker.
You know how I go here. I'll let you state your name and address for the record.
Richard Hagee, and I'm the owner of the property, and my personal address is 23131 Montego Bay Road, Abingdon.
You ready?
Okay. So this will probably be a little long-winded. We've kind of taken quite a lot of due diligence in this one to try to make sure that every bit of our concerns are kind of mapped out for everybody. What I want to do is kind of maybe structure this in a way that at any point, if you want to just stop me and say that you're kind of going to go the route with the recommendation that we waive it, then I'll stop talking.
Well, I mean, you may stop now. Wait a minute.
This is my opportunity to say, do you want to stop now? Because I've got a long
No, I mean, my
presentation.
question is, are there any existing easements along the street for which, if the town ever undertook a larger project, the town is not having to come back and possibly condemn any easements or anything of that nature? Normally, whenever you develop the property, there are going to be applicable utility easements and setbacks along adjoining any street, anything of this nature. I didn't know if there was anything present on this plat.
We're not familiar and we don't know. But we do know the spacing between everything that's applicable on that street. And to think that she's covered a portion of it.
And right here, if you look at the drawing that we have, which is your plat, there's a 25-foot setback, but you did not designate that there was like a 10-foot easement that you were proposing or anything along the front.
I would assume that there's a 10-foot easement for utilities, like normal,
Mhm.
because that pole will sit with a 10-foot easement and it'll sit right
Yeah.
dab in the middle of it.
Well, that was my only question, as to, if the town ever undertook a larger project, instead of having to come back to the property owner, if something was already provided, or if you all may be open to providing, at some point in the future.
The only problem with that is that we're gonna be selling the entire property. So there's the bank building that's gonna be sold, which it's already under contract.
Mhm.
And then the other section, I pretty well think I've got somebody for it, so, I mean, if you wanted to stipulate in there that we have an easement that goes with that, with conveyance of the property to the new owner, we could probably put that in the syntax of the contracts.
I'm not sure we really have, does planning commission have that authority? A typical easement width is 5 feet.
Normally it's 10. So if it's not identified in here, yes, you could ask that their final plat show a 10-foot easement for utilities along the front.
And that's assuming one doesn't exist.
Well,
Yeah.
now.
if there's poles there, there has to be an easement for it.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I
so
mean-
there's something there, but it's not shown on the survey.
Correct. So, I mean, that was the crux to my question as to what's there. And if something's not there, then I don't have a problem with the sidewalk waiver. But if the town were to undertake a larger project, then, you know, we wouldn't have to come back and negotiate then, you know, with you all.
Don't know if you put that stipulation in the deed, that would be with the conveyance of, with the approval that you would have today.
Yeah,
If you
it
waived
would-
it, we could do that. I think that would be no problem.
Okay.
And I could just add that to the listing up front now after we get through with all this.
Okay.
Yep.
And and again, it may be there right now.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, it's gonna be whatever is of record, but if not, then, make that a condition to go along with the approval. It's a good presentation.
Haven't even got cranked up yet. Any more questions?
I was gonna say, this document keeps talking about how it's an injustice. It's an inconvenience, it's not an injustice.
Underneath, there's a code in Virginia that we're looking at that calls for an injustice or a financial hardship. So as far as we're concerned, it would be an injustice on our part for the examples that were given
The
underneath
problem
this.
is the planning commission and town council over the years keep waiving sidewalks, and people come in and are like, well, there's no sidewalks anywhere near here. Well, yeah, because they were all waived, and the whole idea is to make a walkable community over the years. And it's kind of immaterial if there's anything connecting to it right now. You know, it says Sam Steed can never be subdivided, so there will never be a sidewalk there. Well, the town could build a sidewalk there at some point and would connect to the sidewalk that should be on this property as well. So, you know, you can look at it from that point of view.
There's also residential down through there that would have to be connected as well as commercial. So you would be
That's right.
intruding upon that as well.
That's right, but there'd be one less piece that we'd have to do if it was taken care of like it's supposed to be taken care of. So, anyway.
Okay, so what would you're stating the idea of the ordinance is to make sure that at some point, everybody's uniform and connected.
No,
Right.
everybody's connected.
That would be underneath the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
Okay, so what we're stating in this, I mean, I can go, if you'd like, I'd go into the presentation now and just go through the whole thing. If you'd like to look at it. I've got 4 examples right now, and 2 of which actually are the town. There's a .15 mile stretch, which she's already pointed out. That's well, if you've got it picked up here, there's a page, I think it's underneath example 1. Actually, it's example 2. So there's that .15 mile stretch there that's along Main Street but backs up to Colonial Road that the town owns. That whole section is the next adjoining part for the sidewalks underneath your comprehensive plan. Which, the thing is, the injustice that we were saying on this side is, if we're forced to do sidewalks, then the next adjoining piece is the town, and the town hasn't done this. The town hasn't started that project, and it's been there for years. So the ordinance in itself has been in place
Well,
for,
you
what,
could say
20-some
that-
years?
You could say that about anywhere in town, almost. They can't do all the sidewalks in the entire town, like, at one time. They're chipping away at it.
Well, I'm
So,
saying
yeah.
this has been
And
here
so
for like
this-
20 years, though.
This whole thing, there's lots of places that don't have sidewalk that have been there for 20 years. The whole thing is to develop sidewalk throughout the town, so I don't wanna get in an argument with you.
The next,
Position is clear.
the next section that we've got is there in front of Walgreens. I mean, and there's section, it's underneath the example 4. There's a section there that's several hundred feet that's in front of Walgreens that got waived. It's quite bigger than what we're looking at with ours, which is
That-
what, how many, like 75 feet, 80 feet at max, maybe. So there's that section. And then right beside that is a section in between Cozart where he had actually put all of that curb gutter and sidewalk, which is that .43 that's the next sidewalk that we would be able to adjoin to is .43 miles away. The one that's in between that and Kaiser Furniture in front of that on the opposite side of the street is basically that little stretch is where the next sidewalk starts. And the section that's in between Cozart's development and Walgreens is the town's, and that hasn't been done. So there's all these little sections that are incomplete in that entire area. Not only that, but that entire section was built in the 60s. Most of it was developed in the 60s and 70s. There are 0 sidewalks there. We would be an island unto ourselves if we went and put sidewalks in that section. So that there's 4 examples in there we feel like that are an injustice on this side. If we were forced or required to do sidewalks, we feel it would be pertinent that the town would start their section that adjoins us in that entire .15 mile stretch. I mean, that would be what we would want to happen if we were required to go that route. However, I feel like a waiver in this situation is, I think it's important to look at it that way because there's nothing else around us. I think you'd have to tear down about everything through there and redevelop it in order to do sidewalks.
And that was my point. Everybody comes here and says the same thing. Well, does it connect to anything? Well, if we stopped waiving these 20 years ago, we would have stuff out there. So anyway, anybody have any feelings or want to make a motion or anything?
Well, as,
2012 was, can I interject and just say 2012 is when Walgreens was put into play? That's when it was developed. And it fronts, Main Street and 19, a big major intersection there.
I certainly, Mr. Chairman, understand and appreciate your viewpoint. I tend to lean, though, that if a larger project scope was undertaken, that's when the sidewalks would be developed here. But we need the easements reserved so that should a project be undertaken, then we've got the area to do so, versus having to try to come back and condemn and what have you. And as you stated, Mr. Chairman, those poles, everything right now would have to be relocated. Now, I don't know if that is the responsibility of, VDOT, AEP, the landowner. But with that section of road, I'm not opposed to the waiver, provided the easements are reserved.
We could do that. Easy.
Is that a motion?
I'm sorry.
Make that a motion?
Yeah, I was just talking. That is a motion. I make a motion that we approve the waiver with the provision that 10-foot utility easement is either verified and or reserved along the front for future utilization of town sidewalks should the town undertake a larger project.
Yeah.
All right, do we have a second?
Yes.
Okay, we got a second. Any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Sproles?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
No.
All right, so it's 4-1.
All right. So that leads us to the preliminary plat for 968 Main Street. This is for the actual subdivision, right?
Correct.
Okay. I don't know if any more discussion is necessary? Any motions floating out there?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't know, it's the same property, so.
Yep.
I don't know that any further discussion's needed, but if anyone has a motion or.
I make a motion that we recommend to town council, I'm sorry, no, I make a motion we approve the preliminary plat as submitted.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Ms. Quetch,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Weaver,
Aye.
Mr. Sproles.
Aye.
And Mr. Wilson.
Aye. All right, thank you all. Move on to 1060 West Main Street. It looks like this one's divided into sidewalk waiver and preliminary plat. So let's start with the sidewalk waiver.
Okay. So this is very similar in nature to the last one that you reviewed. It is, Dirk Crendel and James Tench are the owners. Kelly Graham is the applicant, are requesting to subdivide 1060 West Main Street. The applicants have said that there'd be no visual difference in the parking access or easements between what's considered the antique barn and the Stone Mill Village, buildings and businesses. Again, there's no additional construction. The primary goal for this request is for division and purchase. And so, again, staff did the analysis and, there's no additional items to request for the subdivision because everything's already built. So just for the record, the applicants are requesting a waiver from the requirements of 6.7 by the town council. Planning Commission's role is to recommend approval or denial of the waiver, and town council will meet on May 5th to make a determination. Very similarly, we had it reviewed by the town engineer, and again, he indicated it's still West Main Street, so we've got the same average daily traffic, 21,000 cars each direction, 16,000 cars each direction respectively. And in his opinion, sidewalk connections cannot be made on either side of the proposed subdivision. And this time, the existing sidewalk is at a closest 0.7 miles to the east. And in this scenario, both frontages for the subject property connect to signalized intersections that aren't currently equipped with pedestrian signals and marked crosswalks. So again, this is another portion of town where the town engineer indicated that if we were gonna put sidewalks in here, we really needed to look at it from a much larger project. So, with that, if you have any questions that I can answer, I'd be more than happy to, or the applicants have additional, information on their project.
All right. Anyone wanna speak or just questions, anybody? Or
Yeah. Did you want to bring those photos up?
I can, yeah.
I am Kelly Graham with Graham and Associates. My address is 126 Martin Luther King Boulevard in Bristol, Tennessee. That's where my company is. If you saw on the survey, this is an interior subdivision. And if you're familiar with the property, you got the two buildings down on the bottom, you've got the one building up on top of the hill, and all we're doing is cutting a line between the two. And if you'll notice on these photographs, there's a 25-30 foot drop from up where the red barn is down to where the two buildings are. And so if we were to put sidewalks along that division line, it would be all the way up there on top of the hill where you can see where the parking lot is before it goes down, and it's almost sidewalks from nowhere to nowhere. So that's why we were obviously asking for the waiver. Any questions?
When Mr. Light originally subdivided that property, I'm assuming sidewalks along Main Street were also waived at that time? Do we know?
That I don't know.
it must have been.
Yeah, and the only reason is the property Let me find my north arrow. Property to the west, which is right across from Pioneer, one day could be developed. You have everything with the fairgrounds. You know, if you had sidewalks right along Main Street, I understand the slope is difficult, but I mean, you've got, and I say that, you've got space there right now.
That looks good, yeah.
So, I mean, my question would be the same question as before. What are the interior easements relative to the property?
Our survey does not show it, but as you can see, there's plenty of room there if needed. Our assumption is that the sidewalks that would be requested by the subdivision, it would be between the two pieces of property being created, not down on the existing road, because that's not being touched.
I figured it was just road frontage, not anything
Yep.
to do with the subdivision line.
And as the town engineer pointed out, there's not any crosswalks or anything down there. You really don't want people down there.
At this time, really don't know what's going to be there in 15, 20 years.
Again, that's what everybody says, and they just keep waving them.
Are there any pedestrian markings, any crosswalks, anything of that nature from the lower portion up to the top portion? I don't recall
No.
that there are.
There
Are
are
there
not.
any stairwells, anything of that nature?
No. As we pointed out in our application, the public will never have any knowledge that is now two owners instead of one. There'll be cross easement parking, cross easement ingress, egress. Nothing changes, other than the fact that part of it's going to be retained by the original owners and part of it is going to be purchased by a third party. That's all.
I would actually think that both, you're mentioning cross easements, that both owners would want to facilitate traffic back and forth in between the two properties.
That-
You've got the red barn up top, which is
Yep.
going to be, I'm assuming, commercial sales, retail. And then you've got different restaurants in the lower portion. Seems like that'd be an added advantage to provide the pedestrians a way to get back and forth.
Well, if we were to do sidewalks at the top of the slope, it would require steps and so forth, which is, of course, not a requirement. But that's why we're saying that we would like to see this way, because just sidewalks along the edge of the parking lot where the division line's going to be, subdivision line's going to be. will
If
not
you
do
could,
anything.
along the bottom entrance road, sidewalks, again, that's going to be on the north side of the upper parcel. You would have trucks back up to the loading docks on the western end of the building of the red barn. Okay, so if there was a way for pedestrians to get a sidewalk along the northernmost portion of that property, you know where I'm referencing? Here, just come up here. Here's this bottom entrance road. Trucks would come up here and back up, and then they would load out here. All right, if there was some sidewalk or something here that would facilitate traffic, safe traffic, from the red barn up here, down here, to the applicable restaurants here, and the other shops, how much of an inconvenience?
There's a real topo situation trying to pull that off, because the only flat area is where the driveway is right now, because there's a real topo situation. All this is slope, and so you would have to eat into that hill. If
You would be following the same grade as the slope here.
On the top of the slope, or on the top where this driveway is you making reference to?
What's the grade of the driveway right here?
Well, it's an incline.
Okay. It's not a 90-degree
No,
incline.
no, that
It's,
straight smack.
You know,
It's
is it a
like that.
15? Is it a 10?
I'd say 15, maybe
Same.
10.
That fish has got it right there.
That's what you're making reference to?
Okay, you've got a sidewalk there along the buildings, right
Yeah,
there.
right there. There
Okay,
is.
is there a continuation up onto the upper half?
No, there's not. As you can see, parking is through there. Obviously, if you're trying to put additional sidewalks or something, you'd have to give up the parking.
Correct, but if you continued, scroll that back around, please. If you continued the sidewalk on the right-hand side, just on up the building to where folks could walk in a safe fashion up to the antique barn.
I may be mistaken, but where that pediment sticks out at the end of the building, I believe there are steps there that you would have to go up, and then
Yeah, if you go up that sidewalk, you walk up to a porch, and then it just drops off. I mean, there's no place to put a continuous
And you all
sidewalk.
will have to forgive me because I meant to drive up there and look at these, so please forgive the questions, but
Well, the ordinance talks more about street, like public streets. It's not concerned with
Yeah.
internal circulation at all. So we'd be talking about Main Street.
Main Street and
Jonesboro Road.
it,
Jonesboro Road,
neither one of those are.
same as the other property.
Correct.
Well, do you have any desire to make a motion or anything?
Same as last.
I move that we make a recommendation to town council that we waive the sidewalk requirement. I'd word it the same as Jeff's previous motion, with a different address, with 1060 West Main Street.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
For our clarification, what does that mean? After the waiver, then what?
Waiving it, and then I think you said a 10-foot easement for any future sidewalks, right?
Where?
The frontage of 11W, or Main Street and Old Jonesboro Road.
And those easements may already exist.
So your final plat, when you come in with your final plat, because the preliminary plat is not, we don't record that, and the final plat, you'd want to come in with a 10-foot easement along the frontage.
It shouldn't affect anything, but
Oh, Jonesboro is gonna be a topo issue.
Why is that a tough issue?
I mean, it's, if you were to come, if we were to look at,
Yeah, topographically, the topo is a steep incline. What we're asking is that the easements be reserved.
this is just a paper exercise. But
Yeah.
regardless of the ability to do it, doesn't really enter into it, because 80% of the frontage we could use and put sidewalks on without too much trouble. It's
So
just
what
this
you're
one
asking-
little stretch.
so what you're asking for is a 10-foot easement right there where the arrow is.
That's my understanding.
And
Well, I wasn't thinking Old Jonesboro Road, I was thinking the new Jonesboro Road.
Well, they don't front on New Jonesboro Road except down below the, to the
Corner to
left
the
there,
right. Yeah.
right there, that stretch. And that's fine for sidewalk.
Yeah. And again, Mr. Graham, my guess is that these easements already exist.
they probably do, but we want to make sure that we know what you're asking for when we go back to our surveyor and say, give us our final plat. So we're only talking about an L-shaped easement on Old Jonesboro and then Main?
Correct.
Okay.
10-foot easement.
10-foot easement, we good? Okay.
Like they say, problem.
Yeah. Most property lines out there do.
Yep.
Any other questions for us? We'll get out of the way.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We had discussion. We have a roll call, please.
Ms. Quach?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Sproles?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
No. All right, now we move on to the second part, which is actually the subdivision. And again, there's really nothing new to discuss here, so if anyone feels like making a motion.
I make a motion, we approve the preliminary plat as submitted.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? No? All right, roll call, please.
Ms. Quach?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Sproles?
Aye.
And Mr. Wilson?
Aye. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
very much. Thank you.
All right, now we move to old business. The PUD/cottage housing, any movement on that?
He didn't actually, we put it on the agenda, but he hasn't come forward with
Okay,
anything,
he was
so.
gonna bring a little bit
Yeah.
more information.
Yeah.
All right, and then if you give us an update on the subdivision ordinance?
Sure, so I took our last list of items that you all had requested that I basically worked through with town council because there were some concerns as to whether or not if they were gonna get to town council and town council was gonna go one direction, then, you know, why were we rewriting it that way? So I'll just run through these real quick.
Okay.
Short-term rentals, town council agreed with the planning commission on a registration process. Accessory dwelling units, town council agreed with the planning commission on allowing these. Animals, town council, and Ms. Quetch is here tonight, so she could defend her position if she wishes, said that she would like to allow, at least chickens inside on smaller properties, but
Thank you.
permitted, so that we could take away the permit if it was required. No roosters, that would be one of the items, so looking at a permitting for under the 3 acres, and then again, 3 acres or larger, that would be a different story. Landscaping, town council agreed that they were happy that there was less landscaping than originally proposed, where we had kind of mirrored everything to that 40-foot standard. There was some suggestion that maybe even that was still quite a bit of landscaping, so we'll see where that goes. The minor subdivision, which would be a 2-lot subdivision, not ones with waivers, but just the 2 lots, that was discussion that they would be interested in those being administrative, the 2-lot ones. They looked through the OH and merging the sub-districts that you all had looked at, and they were comfortable with the uses that were proposed. They were not in favor of the accessory structures being SUPs, because that was where they would have to go through HPRB, Planning Commission, and Town Council. Solar, Town Council was supportive that we're looking at solar. The cottage housing pocket neighborhoods, very similar to you all, supportive of the idea, still looking for more information on it. And so I pushed Nate a little bit. It's really kind of up to him to keep pushing his concept forward. So we're on board if we can see that it works. Signs, town council was supportive of us amending the sign code. I mean, it had only been done like 2 years ago, but we all feel like there's still some things that need to be worked out. The Lamar folks that came and presented to you are now gonna present to the town council, because there needs to be more discussion about the billboards, at the town council level, because that's still a little bit up in the air. Mobile vending, town council agreed that it should be more than just food vendors. And then, just like you all, the rear setbacks, town council agreed with planning commission that we shouldn't lessen the rear setback reduction, but that it seemed like that was really related to a very specific piece of property. So pretty much all in agreement, a couple of things that was slightly different. And then this is where we are with the current calendar. So took that list on the 21st, giving you all an update today on the 25th. Tomorrow I'll send these items back to the Berkeley group. Then the Berkeley group said on May 15th, or somewhere in that general area, they'll have a full draft for us. So, not final, but a full, because we've seen this in pieces. And then they did ask if they could present it to you all they were asking if they could meet on the 26th instead of the 25th. I can pull up a calendar here. So, I guess instead of the 23rd, sorry, so May 26th would be a Thursday. And I could send out an email so you all could look at your schedule, or, I don't, that's I didn't know what to say to them, so.
Yeah.
We might have a work session then, I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll check on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Couple questions on the short-term rentals.
Mhm.
Some of the things that we had discussed previously was being able to enforce complaints,
Yeah.
violations,
Yeah.
things of this nature. And, part of those complaints, you get a noise complaint.
Mhm.
Well, we've talked about the noise ordinance.
Yes.
Really don't have one. You can do anything from 7 to 11, as loud as you want, and then you gotta shut it down at 11.
Mhm.
The county has the system that is tied into decibels, which is measurable. And what I'm looking at is, during the last work session, we're talking about revoking a permit for short-term rental for, I think it's 3 verified complaints. But it puts the town in a difficult position whenever how are you verifying things? How are you enforcing it? Things need to be as black and white and as measurable as we can be, and that's one reason. These are tentacles that reach into other areas. I don't know how we address it unless we're talking about addressing other ordinances as well.
We can. So, for example, just recently, I took an amendment to the sidewalk ordinance to town council, separate from anything that we do here, because, and I'm not sure how many of you all saw the video the other day of the truck that knocked down right into front of Foresta. They knocked down the water, or 2 of the mailboxes and the hydrant, and they almost wrecked right into the front of it because they looked like they were making a right-hand turn and made a left-hand turn. And so a lot of people, including Foresta, have been asking for outdoor seating. And so even though that's not really a zoning thing, it still falls into the realm of community development. So we took through a sidewalk amendment, and now we're gonna start permitting outdoor seating, and where they have to provide their insurance to us, and we have to make sure that there's ADA compliance. So while noise isn't necessarily something the planning commission, if that is something that we think that we need to review the noise ordinance,
Well, it's just,
we can.
it puts the town in a difficult position whenever you're trying to enforce some of these ordinances. You gotta have the tools to do it.
Barking dogs is another one.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, we have a huge issue where dogs are being left outside all day and barking, and then they're put up from 7, or 11 to 7,
Yeah.
and so then it's hard to regulate.
Whenever the county reviewed their ordinance, everything was researched as far as the city of Richmond, Virginia Beach, historic areas, to make sure that it was enforceable within the court system. And having a measurable, to where you could take out a device, and it's not telling someone what they can and can't do with their property. They can do whatever they want until they start infringing on someone else's property. But animals, as far as chickens and things, certainly don't have a problem with it, but is there a number?
Yes.
What is,
We were saying that basically it was no more than 4 chickens on parcels less than 3 acres.
okay. Yeah,
And the big concern there is, yes, we don't want people running like a full production of,
Dutton Wagner.
Yeah.
yes.
So, okay, the OH. Say that again, as far as accessory buildings.
Sure, so when we had originally talked about it, it seemed like there was an interest from you all that all accessory structures would be special use permits. which would mean that they would go to HPRB for review for design, then they would come here for like a zoning approval, and then town council would be the final reviewer. I didn't get a lot of support at the town council level to take a look at each one of the, like, garages and pergolas and all those things, so.
I mean, but town council, Abingdon Town Council was the first in the state of Virginia back in 1971, 72 to pass an OH ordinance. That is one of the backbones of our town. Not so much the town council may need to review it, but any structures of that nature definitely need to go to the HPRB to
Yes.
ensure that they're
Definitely.
in compliance
Yeah.
with the OH.
Definitely.
So is there a way that with approval, whether it could be just a COA,
Yes.
how do we do that?
They go through that process already, and basically, that's what our COA process is. I think that the last one we had it wasn't on Plum Alley. There was one,
Well, you've got the new I'm not even sure
Yeah,
that's in the
stru-
OH.
Vicki Wampler's here.
Mhm.
She's in the OH, yeah, and that went through the HPRB. It actually went through twice because she moved her door to the side. So we actually did a stop work order on that one and did an enforcement action and brought her back in front of the HPRB, so that one has.
Which several years ago, that wouldn't have been done.
Okay.
So I
It's-
applaud
okay,
the
good.
town.
Good. Yeah, we're definitely keeping an eye on them. Gabe, our other staff member, we have a whole list of our COAs and we're monitoring each one of them, and he's doing drive-bys and keeping an eye on them, so it's kind of like a little, mother-in-law apartment, yeah. Yeah, so they definitely would go there, and, I think one of the other things that I would suggest is when we do, in June, when we look at the full draft, I would suggest at some point we maybe have a joint work session between planning commission and town council, if you all are amenable to that, because I think that would be really a healthy discussion.
We had talked at one time, and actually Betsy White approached me to see, to make a recommendation to the chairman and to the commission to see if there was be a joint session between planning commission and HPRB.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be
It's a
great
great
if we
idea.
could do sort of and then that way you all have your opportunity and we could, meet around a round table, and then different topics, you could kind of bounce around why it's important to each of you. So if you all are willing, we can definitely set that up. I think once we get a full draft, then it'll still a little bit hard to go back and forth between these different sheets and everything, so. But, yeah, I'd be totally on board with that.
And I'm one member, but I would support it. So,
I think it's a great idea. I also want to commend Maya. She does a great job.
And it's nice to have a new member
Thank you.
with us. We haven't had a town council member for quite some time, so it's nice to have that connection.
All right, any other announcements or anything?
I will say a sad announcement that I have to make, and that is that Janice is choosing to go to another job.
Wow.
They're gonna give her a lot more flexibility and a lot more money than we can offer, so congratulations to her. Unfortunately, we lose a very valuable member of our team, so.
can we say no?
I think you should say no.
I think
We've
we
been
should
saying
take a
no
vote.
all week.
Motion.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
All right, well, anybody wanna make a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I wanted to do this, we're adjourned.